Now I will introduce Dr. David Nabarro, and it's also a great pleasure because we know him for many years and appreciate him a lot. So David Nabarro is the co-director of the Imperial College Institute of Global Health Innovation at the Imperial College of London. He supports system leadership for sustainable development through its Switzerland-based social enterprise 4SD. From March 2020, David is appointed Special Envoy of WHO Director General on COVID-19. He secured his medical qualification in 1974 and has worked over 50 countries in communities, hospitals, governments, civil society, universities, and in United Nations program. And I had the privilege to work with David on influenza pandemic in 2009 and before, on Ebola in 2014, and now on COVID-19. So it's really a great pleasure for me to introduce him. And David, now you have the floor. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd first of all like to introduce myself to everybody beyond what Sylvie just said. And I'd also like to explain why I am particularly pleased to be with you here today. I'm then going to make 3 points, and then I hope that it'll be possible through conversation to move forward on this really important issue. I've just been looking up on the internet about a film. It's called Plandemic. I wonder if any of you have ever seen it. It's a very short film that basically says that COVID-19 is a conspiracy. And it sets out a very clear and I believe quite convincing explanation for why it is that we all need to basically reconsider what we know about this particular virus and its problems. It includes a number of people who present themselves as medical researchers, and I understand that millions of people have viewed it. I first found out about it from a member of my family who contacted me and said, David, do you think it's true? Do you think it's true that this is all a conspiracy? Do you think it's true that perhaps this is all being done to enable people to make money out of developing vaccines? And I thought to myself, how do I react to this? Here's what I believe is at the heart of this. For many of us, the arrival of this really brutal virus has shaken our understanding of what is really at the center of life. It's caused us to rethink what it is that is at the heart of our existence. It's caused us to question whether or not aspects of our day-to-day life are actually still valid. For some of us, like Dr. Briand or myself or others, yeah, we can explain it. We know about viruses. We know about emerging diseases. We know about pandemic threats. We've lived through outbreaks and pandemics. It's kind of part of our life. It's part of our worldview. But there are so many people who don't know what a virus is, who don't understand the nature of diseases caused by viruses, who don't fully get the issue of transmission of viruses, and who want to believe that this is all some hoax that is created as a result of particular behavior by powerful and rich people. And that matters to them for their sense of worldview. And I suppose because it was somebody in my family who asked me about this particular film, which really does question the basis on which many of us are working, I had to just ask myself, can I get a feeling as to why that question is there? And that's led me to having real respect and appreciation for people who believe in conspiracy theories, and say to myself, perhaps I've got to understand why they are coming from the place where they are, rather than to see it as something that puts them at fault, that I need to address through instruments under my control. So where's this getting me? Answer: we must not blame others if they are believing things that we believe are conspiracy theories. We must accept that this is a perfectly reasonable human behavior that's based on real confusion and fear that's coming from what's happened in the last 6 months. And we must support people as they make their journey of discovery, as they work through and make sense of this new phenomenon. Because if we don't support them, and if we don't accompany them, then they will find us potentially unacceptable people to engage with. Now, why have I reached this point? What has made me somebody who's worked on public health issues for more than 40 years, presenting myself to you as somebody who is tolerant of people who believe in conspiracy theories? Answer: it all started really when I was working in Nepal 40 years ago. And we would go to villages with local health workers, and we'd talk to people, often in a very intimate way, about diseases, health challenges. And they would listen to us and look at us with real respect, but then say after a bit, no, don't understand this. We don't get this. We have our own belief systems about disease. We have our own belief systems about how to prevent disease. Whether it was not eating much during pregnancy, so the baby is small and slips out of the birth canal more easily, or giving a child sugared water immediately after delivery as part of the process of opening the body to good spirits, when that, of course, can create all sorts of problems due to infection, or the herbs and other treatments to be adopted to deal with infectious diseases. It's no good, we realized, us believing that we could offer our own disease structures and explanations of what causes diseases and expect people to come to our belief system immediately. It would take time. We had to work with village leaders, get into the way in which they understood disease, and then work with them. And after a bit, they would say to us, okay, you want us to help some of the people in the villages to understand about clean water and sanitation and the importance of hand washing, or you want us to explain and understand about nutrition. Let us do it in our way. Don't force us into seeing things your way. So fast forward until 2014, I was working with Sylvie and others on Ebola in West Africa. And we were trying to help villagers understand that sickness treatment rituals and funeral practices were actually the source of Ebola outbreaks. And again, they said to us, okay, that might be true, but we, the leaders, want to be able to communicate this to people using their belief structures. And together with the president of Liberia, I remember participating in discussions with local leaders. And she said to them, you take the issue, you resolve it yourselves using your imagery, your belief systems, but just make certain that the risks of Ebola are decreased. And of course, that happened. And there were some fabulous, wonderful shifts in behavior that reduced the incidence of Ebola in the parts of Liberia where I was active quite early on. And I think that this brings me to my absolute conviction that we need to understand that people look at issues from their own perceptions. They don't necessarily accept outsiders' perceptions, and they make changes based on that. So to my last point, this conference is important, and all of you participating in it are vitally important, because I think that we are all understanding that we cannot impose any particular belief system onto others and then require them to change how they go about dealing with an issue. Instead, we have to connect with them where they really are. We have to touch them in a way that they can understand, and we have to be really patient with the reality that it may take them some time to shift. So, number one, is it worthwhile wearing a mask to reduce your risk of perhaps passing on asymptomatic COVID to others? Well, there will be some who get really cross about this and who absolutely disagree with it, but others who are saying it's now time to do it. The science tells us that yes, there is some benefit from masking, particularly if you might have the symptoms. But if there are individuals who believe that wearing a mask makes them look weak, or makes them not look decisive, or makes them lose power, we're probably not going to persuade them through logic and through facts. Instead, what we need to do is to connect with their belief systems and work from inside those by stressing that there isn't anything demeaning or disempowering about wearing a mask. And yesterday, watching the Italian president go with people singing in northern Italy, wearing masks, showing that they're prepared and ready to do this as part of their effort, I thought, great, and let's hope that some other leaders. And then final point is that I think that those of us who want to ensure that people are able to get the best access to information probably need to invest at least as much time in connecting with people where they are as we do in telling people where we want them to be. And so I'd like every one of us, as we go through this important conference, to be always thinking, where is that person who I'm talking to? What is their belief system and structure? And can I level with them to help them to get to a position that might be more in keeping with what the science tells us? So thank you very much indeed for the chance to open this up. I look forward very much now to a conversation with Sylvie and others. And I hope also to be able to have the chance to work with one or two of you over time, because I do believe in the end that helping everybody to be on the same page when it comes to information is the absolute key to learning to live with and make sense of this virus for the foreseeable future. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, David. Really very inspiring talks, and I think remind us that we are humans and people living on the same planet, and this, in spite of our difference of views and beliefs and perspective, we have to be together to combat this pandemic. So really, thanks a lot for this. So indeed, now I would like to ask you 3 questions so that you can express with more details how you see things, and that we can also reflect on those issues all together. So you mentioned that we need to accept that others have different view, different perception, different beliefs. You called for tolerance in this respect. And so for us who are really working to transmit good information so that people can be empowered to do what they need to do to protect their health. So from what you said also, we shouldn't wait for them to come to us, but really try to reach out and tell and try to engage in a dialogue with them. So in your experience, what are the most effective way to do this?
Thank you very much indeed. First of all, I have to stress one thing to everybody. I don't conceive of myself as an expert in health communication. And also, I'm very aware of my limitations in this area. That doesn't mean I feel incompetent as a public health person, but the more I do my work, the more I realize that none of us has all the answers. And perhaps that's the most important starting point, that we build into our way of working the kind of humility that is necessary to acknowledge that we're not all powerful and we just don't know so much. I've learned that a bit from Tedros, the Director General of WHO. You'll hear him, I believe, tomorrow. But he is extremely clear in the way in which he goes about his work, that humility is a primary requirement of people who work in public health, i.e., I don't know the answers, and I'm comfortable with that. Secondly, Sylvie, I do think that acknowledging that people see things differently, people get confused, people get scared, people get angry when they're told they can't do what they'd like to do because of worries about disease, or they can't do what they'd like to do because of concerns they might hurt themselves or hurt others. I think that acknowledging that sometimes it's really difficult for people to come to terms with is super helpful. So humility and recognition of the challenges that people face. And thirdly, acknowledging that it takes time to work through this. And that we don't always do it in a nice, neat, straight line. One day, when I'm feeling plenty rested, I'm probably looking after my diet better than other days when I'm super tired and fed up. And I'm a bit slack when it comes to deciding what's right for me to eat. So recognizing that the circumstances in which we are have a huge impact on what we eat and how we eat it. So Sylvie, in answer to your question, I think an awful lot relates to how we present ourselves. We present ourselves as vulnerable and having a degree of humility. We present ourselves as understanding where people come from and appreciating that they have their own reasons for doing things. And we present ourselves as also having our own frailties when it comes to following advice. We may forget to wash our hands, or we may forget that it's inappropriate to be close up to people and we accidentally shake hands. That's okay. And I think that that kind of overall, I'm going to use the word authenticity, is okay when it comes to communicating. And I think probably in the end makes us come across better. I've been watching the Prime Minister of New Zealand with some of her communication. And I must say, I'm really impressed by the way in which she connects with people. in a way that is authentic and is understanding and has humility, and also at the same time a degree of willingness to be vulnerable. And yet here's a person who's showing incredible leadership in the way in which she, her government, her country, her people are dealing with COVID. So that's my reaction to your first question. It's an awful lot about us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is really a very good introduction maybe to the next question, because we know that during epidemic there will be, well, I cannot say bad or good, because we know that it's a problem of perspective sometimes, but really misinformation can be really a barrier in COVID response. And in any public health response. I'm sure that you have seen this also when you were in Western Africa for Ebola. And so I understand that there are lots of things that can be overcome with an attitude that allow for this dialogue and understanding. But really, when you meet someone who has a very different beliefs from yours, and that and you feel that those beliefs are really a misconception about COVID, how do you work with them to provide them with maybe another point of view, and help them maybe to also find the right information so that they can adapt their behavior to protect their health?
Sylvie, thank you so much for this question. It takes me to something that I have quite deep inside me. Is it right only to work with people with whom you get on easily? Or do you accept that you have to be able to work with people who have very different perspectives from yours? I've often asked this question of myself. I think that we prefer to work with people who we get on with, who we see eye to eye with. But in reality, those of us who've worked in hospitals or in public health or in development or in government, civil society, business, in reality, we have to be able to work with everybody, including those with a very different worldview. And I think it's important that we make a habit of doing that. I will work with people with whom I don't agree. I'm just suggesting that to you as a motto, to say sometimes, I will work with those who have a different view. For many, there's no choice. People who are in low-paid jobs, or people who've not got much room for maneuver in their places of employment, have to be able to fit in with what their bosses think, what their bosses say. They don't have a choice. And so my starting point is, I will work with people with whom I don't agree. And added to that, I will actually find ways to get along with people with whom I don't agree. And then we move to the third step, which is I will do everything I can to make it comfortable for the person with whom I don't agree to shift her or his position. And that third part, comfortable to shift position, is a really interesting thing. Because do you know, if you're asking somebody to shift their position, but the price of them shifting their position is they have to admit that you were right and they were wrong, then it makes the shift very difficult indeed. But if they can shift their position and at the same time they perceive that it's not just them having to make the shift, but you're also shifting as well, so that there's a sense that you're both making a move, then it's more likely to happen. Nobody wants to lose face. Nobody wants to feel humiliation. And although we might feel, because of the way life is presented, that it is about being on top of the other and being able to push them to change their position, in real life, change happens when people feel comfortable about making the change. Change happens when you don't create a sense that they're having to step down, lose face, humiliate themselves, but instead when it feels like you're both together shifting your position. So work with people you don't get on with. Enjoy engaging with them and actually feel that this is a good thing to do, and then help them to be able to shift position without them feeling that they've had to humiliate themselves or give in to you or any other activity that feels like loss of face. I'm still learning how to do this. Some of you who know me know that I'm quite a forthright person, but over time, I have begun to learn that there are ways of helping people to shift without them feeling that they've had to lose, instead them feeling that they've moved with me. And it's fun. It feels good when you do that. Back to you, Sylvie.
Thanks a lot, David. I think it's extremely rich what you provide us, and I've picked up some words: tolerance, humility, authenticity, engage with people with different views, create the condition to make people feel comfortable, and somehow create the win-win place where we can all discuss, exchange views, and find the best solution. So my last question would be for you, if you can tell us, for all the public health leaders that are on the call, or all the young professionals that are also in this conversation, can you give us an additional advice on how we can deal with this infodemic? Because at the end of the day, what you mentioned is extremely important, but we have also to face something that is on social media. So it's a phenomenon that is really enormous as well. And so how can we translate those very nice attributes or characteristic or positioning of the way we deal with information into the new world of social media, and how we can do our job better? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, as somebody who had to leave WHO, I moved to work in the Office of the UN Secretary General some years ago. Coming back and working with friends in WHO in the last 6 months has been a real joy. If it weren't for social media, I think we might have a different view of what is happening right now. Just remember that the joy and beauty of social media is it means that anybody, anywhere, can go public with their beliefs and their anxieties, and they have a good chance of being picked up by others, and then their beliefs and attitudes can get widespread coverage. It's a really extraordinary opportunity. Now, before we had social media, that just didn't exist. If I wanted to go and do a protest about something that had happened, I couldn't just find a way to do it through social media. I had to go out and demonstrate. I remember once being a sole demonstrator outside a particular building, trying to make a comment on a political activity. I felt a bit stupid, really, but that's what I wanted to do. I haven't done it too often since. Just imagine nowadays, You don't have to go out and demonstrate. You just put a post onto your Twitter account or LinkedIn or TikTok or whatever, and then suddenly you're part of a movement. So this is a new thing, but I don't think it means that there's anything gone wrong with what we do. WHO is brilliant because it's a place where the public health community can come together in an atmosphere of trust and mutual respect. And you might say, well, that doesn't feel like that. We've got countries trying to withdraw from WHO. But actually, at its heart, WHO is a fellowship of people who are working for public health for the common good. And they really respect each other, just as in the same way as they're tied together by a sense of solidarity, support for humanity, for human life, regardless of race, regardless of wealth, regardless of geography, regardless of sex or sexual orientation. Everybody matters when you're in public health. WHO is the centerpiece of an extraordinary network of thousands of people who have this shared value. Don't lose sight of that, anybody. That is a really beautiful thing. And yes, there will be people who are critical on social media, and sometimes they're really horrible. But they are not the majority. The majority are this broad community of people who share the values of public health and who come together in solidarity. So that's number one, is remember our strengths. We are amazing. Number two is do everything possible to maintain the rhythm of communication about what we know and what we believe. It is actually that rhythm, that regularity, that I believe person-focused, constant provision of information that is the key. Sometimes we get tired of saying the same thing, but the best communicators go back and are not scared of repeating their same messages. And so be consistent. Don't stop. Regular rhythm of communication. Number three, always think about the people who are receiving the information. Put ourselves in their shoes. Create space for two-way communication. Set up radio phone-ins. I have a constant information about a radio phone-in in Somalia, proving to be hugely important to help Somali people make sense of the COVID. Keep the two-way dialogue going. Try all the time to understand where people are at. Recognize that they have their own anxieties and just keep it there. Remember that we have to put ourselves into the perspective of other people. So those are my three things, Sylvie. Remember, WHO is more than just the organization and the member states and all the stuff we read. It's a huge network of people who share public health values. Number two, is a regular rhythm of communication really matters in a warm, reassuring, supportive way. Even when it's bad news, keep it going. Don't do any fibbing, just tell it straight. Number three, remember that people are all picking stuff up from their own perspectives. Two-way communication in all sorts of forms is absolutely key. It's more than social media to communication. And Sylvia, I do think, Sylvia, that you and your colleagues in WHO are doing an amazing job. And I really want you to hold on to that, because despite some of the noise, there is a very large amount of information getting across. And I believe that on this particular series of outbreaks, the COVID, we've got much greater public understanding than I've seen on any series of diseases ever before.
Thanks a million, David. I mean, for these words that are really really important for us to keep the work, and because as you know, we have been working very hard for the past 6 months, all people, and I'm sure online also there are people in their own country, in their own continent, working as hard as we have been doing, and so they will certainly really hear what you say and feel also cheered up by this. And I fully agree with you. What we share is our values. We really want to make a difference for the world and make sure people are healthier and safe. And so that's why, I mean, we are here today also to share our best practices, our point of views as well, try to improve the way we do things. And I think your opening remarks and these answer to questions were really excellent to set the scene of what we want to achieve today.